Welcome, everyone. Today we're diving into a critical aspect of your future careers that doesn't involve a microtome or a staining rack, but is just as vital to your success. We're focusing on Chapter 13 of POSGER's Legal and Ethical Issues for Health Professionals. As you move into upper-level histotechnology, you aren't just technicians, you are healthcare professionals. This means you operate within a complex web of rights, what you are entitled to, and responsibilities, what is expected of you. In the high-stakes environment of a pathology lab, understanding these boundaries is non-negotiable. My goal is for you to walk out of here feeling empowered and informed about your role in the healthcare hierarchy. We'll start by outlining what we'll cover today. Before we get into the weeds, let's look at our roadmap. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to clearly describe the rights you hold as an employee. Things like fair treatment, privacy, and the right to a safe work environment. But rights are only half the story. We'll also define your responsibilities. In histology, your responsibility isn't just to the pathologist or the lab manager, it's ultimately to the patient whose tissue is on your block. We'll discuss how to improve professional relationships. Finally, we'll look at the delicate balance between what the law requires and what your own moral compass dictates. This chapter is about that balance. Let's start with the foundation of these rights. Let's start with the big picture. Employee rights aren't just nice-to-haves, they are often codified in state and federal law. The Department of Labor alone enforces over 180 federal laws covering everything from your wages and hours to your safety on the job. Think about the chemicals we use every day: xylene, formalin, various acids. Your right to a safe environment isn't just a suggestion, it's a legal mandate. However, POSGER makes a crucial point right at the start. With every right comes a corresponding duty. If you have the right to a safe workplace, you have the duty to follow safety protocols. It's a two-way street. In the lab, this balance is what keeps the gears turning without grinding the staff down. This leads us to a common, but often misunderstood, concept. You've probably heard the term employment at will. In its purest, historical form, it means that either you or your employer can end the relationship at any time, for any reason, or even for no reason at all. Historically, this gave employers massive leverage. If a lab manager didn't like the way you looked at them, they could technically let you go. However, modern law has put some serious guardrails around this. While many of you will be at-will employees, that doesn't mean you're at the mercy of a whim. There are public policy exceptions, anti-discrimination laws, and implied contracts that protect you. Understanding where you stand on this spectrum is the first step in protecting your career. But remember, at will doesn't mean without limit. The courts have been very clear, at will is not a license for anarchy. In the landmark case Sides versus Duke Hospital, the court noted that in a civilized society, rights must be balanced. If an employer could fire you for refusing to do something illegal, like dumping xylene down the drain to save money, that would weaken the very fabric of our legal system. We've moved away from the old laissez-faire climate where the owner's word was absolute law. Today, even in large corporate lab structures, there's a hierarchy of accountability. You aren't just a hand in the lab, you are a professional with rights that the at-will doctrine cannot simply abrogate. If an action against you violates public interest, the employer can and will be held accountable. Some states have gone even further in codifying these protections. Montana, for instance, has a specific wrongful discharge statute. It outlines three main scenarios where a firing is illegal. First, if it's retaliation for you refusing to break the law or for reporting a violation. Imagine you're told to skip the QC steps on a batch of slides because the pathologist is in a hurry. If you refuse and get fired, that's wrongful discharge. Second, if you've finished your probationary period and are fired without good cause. And third, if the employer ignores their own handbook. If the hospital policy says you get 3 warnings for tardiness but they fire you on the first one, they've violated their own rules. This is why you must read your employee handbook on day 1. It's your shield. Let's look at a real-world scenario from the text. Meet Bill. Bill is a perfectionist. Probably a great histotech, right? He's always exceeded expectations. But then, a data error occurs. One negative evaluation is accidentally counted 3 times, dragging his average down to meets expectations. When he brings it up, his supervisor, Vinny, brushes him off. Now, you might think, it's just a performance review, who cares? But in a professional setting, this data follows you. It affects your raises, your promotions, and your reputation. Bill uses a great analogy. If you get 6 100s and 170 on an exam, but the teacher counts the 73 times, your grade is a lie. In the lab, data integrity is everything. If Vinny is okay with flawed performance data, can you trust him with the lab's TAT data or specimen logs? This case highlights the right to fair treatment and the frustration when supervisors ignore facts. The public policy exception is a huge deal. It basically says that an employer can't fire you for a reason that hurts society. This includes the obvious ones: discrimination based on race, religion, or gender. But it also covers you if you file a complaint with OSHA about poor ventilation in the grossing room, or if you refuse to participate in a fraudulent billing scheme where the lab is charging for stains that weren't actually performed. Public policy favors the exposure of crime and the protection of safety. If the law is silent on a specific issue, courts often look to the state constitution or previous judicial decisions to decide what public policy actually is. As a histotech, you are often the first line of defense for lab safety. Knowing that the law protects your right to speak up is vital. You have a fundamental right to be judged on your skills and qualifications, period. The EEOC is the federal watchdog here. They enforce laws that make it illegal to discriminate based on a long list of protected characteristics. In the lab, this means your ability to produce high-quality sections and your knowledge of special stains should be the only things that matter. It's also illegal to discriminate against someone because they complained about discrimination. If you see a coworker being harassed and you speak up, you are protected. This creates a culture where merit, not bias, dictates who gets the lead tech position or the supervisor role. Let's talk money. The Equal Pay Act mandates that men and women doing the same job in the same place get the same pay. Now, there are exceptions. If one tech has been there 20 years, seniority, or if one tech is consistently producing double the volume of slides, quality/quantity, pay differences are allowed. But gender cannot be the factor. A famous case involved Lilly Ledbetter, who found out after years that she was being paid way less than her male counterparts. The Supreme Court initially said she waited too long to sue, but President Obama signed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act to fix that. It ensures that every discriminatory paycheck restarts the clock for filing a claim. In our field, where the workforce is diverse, ensuring pay equity is a matter of both law and basic respect. This is a sensitive one. Healthcare workers have a right to refuse to participate in certain procedures if they conflict with their deeply held religious or moral beliefs. The most common example is elective abortions. In Doe versus Polka, the court ruled that while a city must provide abortion services, it cannot force individual staff members with moral objections to participate. However, there's a catch. This right isn't absolute. You cannot refuse to provide emergency care. If a patient is hemorrhaging and needs immediate intervention to save their life, your personal beliefs don't allow you to walk away. In the lab, you might encounter this with certain types of research or specimen handling. It's important to know your facility's policy on conscience clauses before you're in the heat of the moment. While we aren't pharmacists, this legal battle is very relevant to the healthcare climate we work in. Some pharmacists refuse to dispense birth control or abortifacients based on religious grounds. This pits the pharmacist's First Amendment rights against the patient's right to access legal medication. Since the Dobbs decision in 2022, this has become even more complex, with state laws and federal mandates often clashing. The federal government has clarified that pharmacies receiving federal funds, like Medicare, generally cannot refuse these prescriptions. Why does this matter to you? Because it shows how quickly the legal landscape can shift in healthcare. As a professional, you need to stay informed about how these high-level court rulings affect the day-to-day operations of your institution. This is one of the most important slides for a histotech. You have the right, and the responsibility, to question care that you believe is detrimental to the patient. In the lab, This might look like questioning a specimen that seems mislabeled or an order for a stain that makes no sense given the clinical history. In the case of Kirk versus Mercy Hospital, a nurse was fired for being too persistent in trying to get a dying patient the right treatment. The court sided with the nurse, stating that her duty to the patient overrode her supervisor's order to stay out of it. If you see something wrong in the lab, a process being skipped, a result being fudged, you have a legal mandate to question it. You are the patient's advocate in the basement, even if you never see their face. Can you suggest that a patient change doctors? It sounds radical, but courts have protected this in specific contexts of patient advocacy. In one case, a nurse was fired for telling a family they might want to reconsider their choice of physician after the doctor failed to respond to a deteriorating patient. The court found this was part of her professional responsibility to counsel and guide. In histotechnology, you might not be talking to families, but you are talking to pathologists and surgeons. If you notice a pattern of poor specimen collection or unclear orders from a specific clinic, bringing that up to your supervisor is a form of this advocacy. It's about ensuring the patient gets the best possible care, even if it means pointing out where the system is failing. Let's talk about the toxic lab environment. Disruptive behavior, screaming, demeaning comments, throwing things, isn't just a personality quirk, it's a safety hazard. Surveys show that disruptive behavior leads to preventable adverse events and medical errors. Why? Because when people are afraid, they don't ask questions. They don't report mistakes. They just try to stay under the radar. The AMA defines disruptive behavior as anything that interferes with patient care. As an employee, you have a right to a workplace free from this. Labs should have clear strategies to deal with difficult high performers. No matter how good a pathologist is, if they create an environment of fear, they are a liability to the patients. Bullying in the workplace isn't just unpleasant. It's a serious problem that impacts patient safety and your well-being. We just talked about disruptive behavior, and bullying is often its more insidious cousin. It's those subtle, yet persistent, threats and humiliations that chip away at morale. This kind of behavior leads to distracted histotechs, which means mistakes on the microtome or in the staining process. Ultimately, a bullied workforce is a less safe workforce, and that directly affects the quality of care. You have a right to a professional environment where you're treated as a colleague, not a target. Let's move on to another critical aspect of workplace conduct: sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is a clear violation of your rights and a serious legal issue in any workplace, especially in a healthcare setting. It's not just about obvious quid pro quo situations, where a job benefit is exchanged for a sexual favor. It also includes creating a hostile work environment through unwelcome comments, jokes, or touching. The close quarters of a histology lab make professional boundaries even more crucial. Your employer has a legal duty to prevent this and to act quickly if it's reported. This is all part of ensuring you're treated with dignity and respect, which is our next topic. Beyond avoiding harassment, you have a fundamental right to be treated with dignity and respect every single day. As Confucius said, without respect, what distinguishes us? This means no public berating, no name-calling, and no being ignored when you raise valid concerns. When dignity is lost, the culture of safety often follows. As future leaders in the lab, you'll need to set the tone. Respect is the baseline, not something earned. This also extends to how your personal information is handled, which brings us to privacy and confidentiality. Your right to privacy in the workplace is important, but it's also a fine line. While your employer can generally monitor company computers and email for legitimate business reasons, they can't do it maliciously. More importantly, your health status or any medical information must remain confidential. Trust is crucial in any organization, and violating an employee's privacy without a very good reason can destroy that trust. This protection extends to your personal life when crises hit, which is where the FMLA comes in. Life throws curveballs, and the Family and Medical Leave Act, or FMLA, is there to help you navigate them without losing your job. This act allows you up to 12 weeks of unpaid, job-protected leave for things like having a baby, caring for a sick family member, or dealing with your own serious health condition. Your health insurance stays active, and you're guaranteed your old job back, or an equivalent one. It's a vital safety net that acknowledges we're humans first, employees second. Now, let's talk about what happens when you see something truly wrong in the workplace. So, we've talked about your rights when life throws a curveball, but what about when you see something truly wrong in the lab? Whistleblowing is when you decide that the public safety is more important than your loyalty to your boss. It's a heavy burden, but it's also a right and a responsibility. The False Claims Act even allows whistleblowers to receive a portion of the recovery, as seen in the Biogen case where a former employee reported kickbacks, leading to a $900 million settlement. Most healthcare organizations have a hotline for anonymous reporting, and the law is supposed to protect you from retaliation. This is a critical protection for you as a healthcare professional, ensuring you can speak up without fear. But I want to be real with you about the challenges of whistleblowing. Now, I want to be real with you, whistleblowing is hard, even with legal protections. While it's the right thing to do, it often doesn't feel rewarding. You might face social isolation or even constructive discharge, where they make your life so miserable you quit. An article from the Wharton School points out that whistleblowers often experience long-term negative effects on their lifestyle. You might be seen as a snitch by coworkers who don't understand the big picture. This is why professional ethics are so important. You do it because it's right, not because it's easy. As you move into your careers, remember that your integrity is the one thing no one can take from you, unless you give it away. But what about your physical safety in the lab? In histology, safety isn't an abstract concept, it's the fume hood that keeps you from breathing xylene, and the gloves that protect you from biohazards. You have a legal right to a safe environment. OSHA received thousands of complaints during the pandemic because healthcare employers weren't providing proper PPE. If your lab isn't providing the equipment you need to stay safe, they are violating your rights. But remember the corresponding duty. If they provide the goggles, you have the responsibility to wear them. This right to a safe environment is fundamental, but what happens if you get hurt on the job, or lose your job through no fault of your own? If you get hurt on the job, say, a repetitive motion injury from microtomy or a chemical splash, you have a right to workers' compensation. This covers your medical bills and a portion of your lost wages. Similarly, if you are laid off through no fault of your own, you have a right to unemployment compensation. These systems are designed to be fair and dependable, and they are part of the social contract of employment. As a professional, you should know how to access these benefits if the worst happens. We've spent the first half talking about what you're owed, but now, let's talk about what you owe. We've spent the first half talking about what you're owed. Now, let's talk about what you owe. John D. Rockefeller Jr. said it best, every right implies a responsibility. You have the right to respect, so you have the duty to give respect. You have the right to a paycheck, so you have the duty to do your job well. In the lab, your responsibilities are defined by your job description, hospital policy, and your professional code of ethics. This isn't just about following the rules, it's about the commitment you made when you entered this profession. This transition marks a shift in our focus, moving from what you can expect to what is expected of you as a histotechnology professional. We've shifted our focus from your rights to your responsibilities, and this one is crucial, knowing your patient. In histology, that means knowing the clinical history behind every specimen. You need to understand why a biopsy was taken, what the surgeon is looking for, and if there are any infectious precautions we need to take. Reading that requisition isn't just a task, it's how you connect the tissue to the person it came from. When you treat every block with that level of care, your work quality naturally rises. It's about recognizing the human being behind that piece of tissue. This commitment to understanding the patient's story helps us empower them. So, how do we empower patients? We educate them and encourage them to ask questions. Patients often feel intimidated by healthcare professionals. There's a real power imbalance. The Joint Commission even created the Speak Up initiative to help patients feel more comfortable participating in their own care. While you might not be talking directly to patients, you play a huge role. You ensure the lab's information is accurate and delivered on time. And you educate your internal customers, the nurses and doctors. If a specimen arrives in the wrong fixative, it's your responsibility to explain why that matters. This helps them provide better care next time, and it helps everyone speak up for quality. These are the speak up suggestions we want patients to follow, but let's turn the mirror on ourselves. Are we making it easy for them? Are we wearing our ID badges clearly? Are we consistently washing our hands? Are we approachable and open to questions? In the lab, if a clinician calls with a question about a result, our job is to be helpful and transparent, not defensive. We're part of the team that makes patients feel safe enough to voice their concerns. And part of that safety comes from a deep sense of compassion. Compassion isn't just a nice to have, it's a professional responsibility. It's easy to become jaded in a busy lab, but remember the case of the nurse who ranted about an obese patient. She chose healthcare for the wrong reasons. If you don't have compassion for the people whose tissue you're processing, you're in the wrong field. Compassion means you don't judge a patient based on their appearance or lifestyle. It means you do your absolute best work on every single slide, because you know there's a person waiting for that answer. And that commitment to quality extends to following all the rules. You have a fundamental responsibility to follow the law. This means adhering to CLI regulations, CAP accreditation standards, and all state licensing laws. If the lab doesn't comply, it's not just the boss who's on the hook. Individual techs can face liability too. Following regulations isn't about just checking boxes, it's about maintaining a national standard of care. When you skip a step in a protocol, you're not being efficient, you're being non-compliant. And that non-compliance can have serious consequences for patient safety. This also applies to our internal guidelines. Hospital policies aren't just suggestions, they are the blueprint for safe and effective operations. We just discussed complying with regulations, and policies are the internal manifestation of those external rules. If the policy says 2 patient identifiers, you use 2. If it says label at the time of collection, you do it. The King Tut example shows what happens when someone thinks they're above the rules. A patient paid the price. Don't be a King Tut. These policies are in place to protect everyone, especially the patient. Ignoring them can lead to serious errors and compromise patient safety. This directly ties into our next point about what auditors look for. When an auditor walks into your lab, they aren't looking for perfection, they're looking for compliance with these policies and regulations. This is a direct follow-up to understanding and following hospital policies. They'll check for expired reagents, which is a huge responsibility for histotechs. They'll make sure your equipment is maintained and that you have a plan for emergencies. Your responsibility is to keep your workspace survey-ready at all times. This isn't just for the auditor, it's for the patient who deserves a lab that follows the highest standards. And this leads us right into your daily responsibilities. Beyond policies and audits, you're responsible for your assigned duties, but also for knowing your limits. We just talked about being survey-ready, and part of that is ensuring everyone is competent in their role. If you're asked to do a complex stain you haven't been trained on, your responsibility is to say, I need training on this first. The case of Phil shows how important professional communication is, even with co-workers. Your assigned duties include maintaining a professional demeanor and protecting the lab's integrity. This also means honoring the rights of the patients whose samples you handle. Even though we don't see patients face-to-face, we absolutely must honor their rights in the lab. This is a natural progression from understanding your assigned duties, as those duties are ultimately in service of the patient. This means handling their tissue with respect and keeping their results private, which is where HIPAA comes in. It also means respecting their right to refuse certain tests. We are the stewards of their biological information. Treating that information with the same respect we'd want for our own family is a core professional duty. And a huge part of that is maintaining confidentiality. Confidentiality is absolutely critical in our field. We just discussed honoring patient rights, and privacy is a cornerstone of those rights. You'll see sensitive diagnoses, patient names, and maybe even famous people's biopsies. Your responsibility is to keep that information strictly within the lab. Talking about a cool case at the bar or posting a slide photo on social media, even without a name, is a massive HIPAA violation and an ethical breach. Information should only be shared on a need-to-know basis for patient care. Once you lose a patient's trust in their privacy, you've failed a primary responsibility. This also ties into adhering to safe practices. Safe practices protect the patient from medical errors. In histology, the biggest safe practice is correct identification. A mix-up in the lab is a never event. It should never happen. The CDC estimates that hospital-acquired infections are a leading cause of death. While we aren't at the bedside, our hand-washing is our clean technique at the microtome and the grossing station. Cross-contamination of a petri dish or a tissue block can lead to a false diagnosis. Quality care is actually cheaper than fixing the consequences of an error. We are human. We will make mistakes. Your responsibility is to admit them immediately. Hiding a mistake, like a lost biopsy or a dropped slide, is a violation of non-maleficence, do no harm. If you hide it, the patient might get the wrong treatment or no treatment. Look at the case of the patient who was given an overdose because the staff wouldn't listen to his concerns about the vial size. They were more interested in protecting their jobs than the patient. In the lab, if you realize you switched 2 blocks, speak up. It might be embarrassing, but it's the only ethical path. Admitting mistakes is a big part of adhering to professional standards. Professionalism isn't just about wearing a clean lab coat. It's about how you interact with the whole healthcare team. The lab is one piece of a complex puzzle. If you are uncooperative or disruptive, you break the chain of care. Courts have upheld that the ability to work with others is a valid professional standard. If you can't work as part of a team, you are a risk to the patient. High-quality care requires seamless communication between the tech, the pathologist, and the clinician. You have to maintain professional boundaries. Look at the case of Justin and Mel. A coordinator, Judy, felt out to get by a report and acted out with total disrespect. This kind of behavior destroys teamwork. As a professional, your responsibility is to try to defuse these situations and remain objective. If you're a manager, your responsibility is to address disrespect immediately. A lab where people are hugging some and glaring at others is not a professional environment. This is a hard line. Sexual impropriety with patients or colleagues is a total breach of your professional oath. Even if an affair is consensual, if it involves a patient, it's considered an abuse of power and is morally and often legally wrong. It can lead to losing your license and facing lawsuits. Organizations have a duty to prevent this, and you have a duty to maintain the highest level of personal integrity. Following our discussion on maintaining professional boundaries, we now turn to a difficult but essential responsibility: reporting unethical behavior. If you see a coworker who is impaired, perhaps by drugs or alcohol, or consistently acts unethically, you absolutely must report it. This isn't about tattling, it's about protecting patients from harm. An impaired tech at the microtome is a direct danger, and an unethical tech who fakes QC logs undermines the integrity of our entire profession. Our field relies on public trust, and when we allow unethical behavior to slide, we all lose that trust. This professional obligation directly ties into our ultimate goal of protecting patients from harm. Building on our discussion of reporting unethical behavior, this slide emphasizes your ultimate responsibility as a histotech: protecting patients from harm. This isn't just some legalistic phrase, it's the very foundation of every healthcare code of ethics, including our own. In the lab, this means everything from making sure fire exits are clear to properly storing chemicals. It's about having a proactive, safety-first mindset in every task you perform. You don't wait for an accident to happen, you actively look for ways to prevent it. This mindset is crucial because our next topic, reporting patient abuse, requires us to be vigilant for those who cannot protect themselves. Following our commitment to protecting patients from harm, we now address the solemn responsibility of reporting patient abuse. If you encounter signs of abuse, perhaps through a patient's clinical history or even subtle cues in a specimen, you have a legal and ethical duty to ensure it's reported. Statutes are in place to protect you from retaliation when you report abuse in good faith. We are an essential part of the safety net for vulnerable populations, and our vigilance can make all the difference. This responsibility often goes hand in hand with standing as a patient advocate, which we'll discuss next. After covering the critical duty of reporting patient abuse, let's talk about a broader role: standing as a patient advocate. Patients often feel lost in the complex maze of the healthcare system. While nurses are often the primary advocates, we in the lab play a crucial, albeit often unseen, role. We provide the accurate, timely truth through our slides and reports that advocates need to make informed decisions. If a result is delayed, we find out why. If a specimen is inadequate, we communicate that clearly so the patient can get a rebiopsy quickly. We are the silent advocates who ensure the patient's journey through the lab is as smooth and accurate as possible. This advocacy requires us to continuously maintain our professional competence. As silent advocates for our patients, it's absolutely essential that we maintain professional competence. You simply can't be a good histotech if you're not a current histotech. Our field is constantly evolving with new antibodies, molecular tests, and digital pathology tools. Your responsibility is to stay on top of these changes. This means reading journals, attending NSH meetings, and participating in continuing education. If you're relying on knowledge from 20 years ago, you're not meeting the national standard of care. This commitment to lifelong learning is vital, especially when we consider how standard practice itself can be challenged, as we'll see in the next slide. We just talked about the importance of staying current, and this slide really drives home why that's so crucial. A fascinating study in The Atlantic showed that many medical practices, long considered standard, were actually found to be ineffective when retested. This isn't just about doctors, it applies directly to us in the lab. We need to be open to new evidence and challenge the status quo. If we're not constantly looking for better, more accurate ways to process tissue, we're falling behind. This commitment to evidence-based practice is what truly moves us forward, and it's a responsibility we all share. Speaking of shared responsibilities, let's talk about how we work together. Teamwork isn't just a nice idea, it's a clinical necessity. As the saying goes, none of us is as smart as all of us. Think about Dr. Jones's Pain Center. By adding a physical therapist and encouraging a multidisciplinary approach, patient outcomes improved. In the lab, teamwork means the grossing tech, the processing tech, and the embedding tech all working in sync. When we realize that other people can help us do a better job than we can do alone, the patient wins. This spirit of cooperation is vital, and it leads us to some practical advice. So, how do we foster that spirit of teamwork? Here's some practical advice for all of us. First, try to build consensus when you're solving problems. Don't just dictate, involve your colleagues. Second, avoid those white lies, like saying the pathologist is right here when they're not. Honesty builds trust. Third, take responsibility for clear communication. If you're busy, say so, but don't let it be an excuse for rudeness. And finally, listen. Really listen. In our fast-paced environment, it's easy to interrupt, but taking the time to hear a co-worker's concern can prevent a major error. This kind of thoughtful interaction also extends to how we treat our patients. Patients in a hospital are often at their most vulnerable, and our responsibility is to treat them with respect and sensitivity. They might be scared, angry, or even disrespectful, but we don't criticize their wishes or their condition. We treat their tissue and their data as sacred. Even when a patient is challenging, our professional standard remains the same. This unwavering respect is a cornerstone of ethical care, and it's something we should all pledge to uphold. This brings us to the Caregiver's Pledge, a simple yet powerful set of promises. It reminds us to be compassionate, to never neglect our duties, and to always verify questionable orders. It also emphasizes the importance of continuously improving our skills. As you move into your careers, think of this pledge as the foundation of your professional identity. It's a commitment to excellence that guides every decision you make in the lab. Now, let's quickly review some of the key rights we've discussed today. Let's quickly recap the employee rights we've discussed today. These are the legal and ethical protections that empower you in the workplace. They ensure you can advocate for patients without fear of unfair reprisal. Your rights include fair treatment and limits to at-will employment. You have the right to a workplace free from discrimination and harassment. Remember, you can refuse to participate in certain procedures and question care you believe is detrimental. Your privacy is protected, and the FMLA provides crucial leave when your family needs you. Finally, whistleblowing protects you when you speak up about wrongdoing. These are the tools the law gives you to ensure you are treated as a professional. Now, let's quickly review your responsibilities. Just as important as your rights are your responsibilities, which we just touched on. These are the expectations placed upon you as a histotechnology professional, ensuring patient safety and ethical conduct. Your responsibilities are the other side of the coin, balancing the rights we just reviewed. They guide your actions every day in the lab. You must know your patient, which means understanding the clinical history behind each specimen. Compliance with all laws and hospital policies is non-negotiable. Maintaining confidentiality and adhering to safe practices are paramount. You also have a responsibility to admit mistakes and to always act with professionalism. You are a patient advocate, a lifelong learner, and a team player. Now, let's make sure we're all on the same page with some key terminology. Before we wrap up, let's quickly test your understanding of some key terms. These aren't just words, they're concepts that will directly impact your career and your ability to navigate the legal and ethical landscape of the lab. Knowing these terms helps you understand your protections and obligations. We discussed employment at will and its critical exceptions. The FMLA of 1993 is vital for balancing work and family. Whistleblowing is about speaking up for the public good. And workplace sexual harassment defines unacceptable behavior. These terms are the language of professionalism in healthcare. So, let's move on to some final discussion questions. Now, let's think about how these concepts apply in the real world. These questions are designed to get you thinking critically about the situations you might face in your careers. They challenge you to apply what we've learned today. Consider the at-will doctrine. Is it still appropriate in today's healthcare environment? Think about when you can ethically refuse to participate in a procedure. And most importantly, how will you personally contribute to building a spirit of teamwork in your lab? Your answers to these questions will shape your professional integrity. Finally, we'll conclude with a look at the path forward. As we conclude, remember that professionalism isn't just a title, it's a daily choice. It's about balancing your rights with your responsibilities, always keeping the patient at the center of everything you do. Your integrity is your most valuable asset in this field. It's what defines you as a histotechnology professional. Thank you for your engagement today. Good luck in your clinicals and your future careers.